Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to see more information about the podcast, or if you'd like to see more of my free resources, you can go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. If you have been getting a lot of value out of this podcast, then please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to this, and leave a positive review. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. I recently had a question from a listener, and he asked me what the Stoics would say about leaving a legacy. And, I loved this question because I've always liked the idea of leaving something beautiful behind after I die, whether it's the albums that I record, the things that I write, the podcast that I put out, or anything else that I've created that represents who I was. And not only that, but I've always thought that the kind of person who you are can really be the greatest legacy that you leave behind. And your example can change the lives of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people long after you are gone. In my own life, I can see how I've been highly influenced by the legacy of many incredible figures throughout history. One example that I could give you might be the incredible speaker Jim Rohn, whose books and videos have absolutely shaped the person who I am today. And not only that, but the way that he lived his life was inspiring to me, because as far as I can tell, he practiced what he preached. So anyway, when I got this question about legacy, I was actually really excited to look into the literature and try to find out what the Stoics would have said. And although I didn't find much, the conclusions that I made about this question have completely reconstructed the way that I look at the legacy that I hope to create. So moving on to what I actually found. Now, as I just mentioned, I didn't find that much in terms of writings from the Stoics about leaving a legacy. But what I did find was possibly a few reasons why they never really spoke much about this topic. I'll give you those reasons in the next few minutes, and then I'll give you my best conclusion about what the Stoics may have thought about leaving a legacy. So my first hypothesis about why they may have never really talked about this is because the Stoics focused heavily on living in the now. Seneca was always talking about how we should live every day as if it were a separate life, because tomorrow may not come. Be the best person that you can be today, because if the goal of life is to live in a virtuous manner, and if death can come swiftly without any warning, then now is the time to live the life that you want to live and to be the person who you're aspiring to be. He also said that true happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future. And the reason why this is relevant to legacy is because when you're focusing on what you'll leave behind and how people will perceive you once you're gone, then you're focusing too much on the future. Doing this, it can get quite difficult to actually become the person who is worthy of that legacy, because your focus is on outward opinions as opposed to your own opinion of yourself. And any time spent worrying about the future is time that could have been spent worrying about right now and who you're becoming today. And this brings me to my second idea about why the Stoics don't often talk about legacy. And that's because they teach us that we should not try to look good to the world, but instead we should try to be good for the sake of being good. One of the few times when Seneca mentioned legacy was when he was talking about this very issue. He said, quote, "When people sit by the bedsides of their sick friends, we honor their motives. But when people do this for the purpose of attaining a legacy, they are like vultures waiting for carrion. The same act may be either shameful or honorable. The purpose and the manner make all the difference." End quote. We should not be aiming at appearances, like the people who Seneca is talking about, but rather we should set our aim at being exactly who we say we are. Appearing to be virtuous is very different from actually being virtuous. We see this often in modern society today, where so many people are trying to appear to be happy or rich or successful, and then they go home at the end of the day and take their prescribed antidepressant medication. And we who associate with these people may remember them as happy and successful because we didn't know. But were they really happy and successful? That's a fake legacy, one that is based on trying to look good instead of trying to be good. See, there's such a pressure forced on everyone to appear to be a certain way and to have certain things, and when you start to follow that trend, then it's very hard to actually be the person who you say you are. We might call this the paradox of outward appearances. The more you try to appear to be something, the less of that something you actually are. My final thought on why we don't really hear the Stoics talking about legacy is that Stoics teach us that we should only spend our efforts on things that we can control, and we should exert no effort towards things that we cannot control. When it comes to other people's opinions of us, well, this is something that we really have very little power over. And if we can control their opinions of us, then it's only through our actions and behaviors that this might be accomplished. Epictetus said, quote, "Why live in fear about things such as whether you will gain public recognition in your profession or community? Even if your reputation were really to matter, you're not responsible for what others think of you. And why should you worry about being a nobody when what matters is being a somebody in those areas of your life over which you have control and in which you can make a real difference?" End quote. Now, granted, Epictetus is talking about reputation in this quote, but I think that we can gain a little perspective into what he would have thought about focusing on your legacy. He may have said something like, why would you spend your time worrying about being a nobody in the future when you could be spending that time becoming a somebody right now? Because here's the thing about your legacy and people's opinions. You may be the nicest person in the world, and there will still be people who hate you. You may be the most horrible person in the world, and yet there will still be people who think you're amazing. So why would you focus on your legacy and what people think of you if you really cannot be sure that they will have these grand opinions of you in the first place? Why not focus on what you think of yourself as opposed to what people think of you? So these are just my thoughts on why the Stoics really didn't say much about legacy. And in a strange way, what I've discovered is that even though they said very little on the subject, they have actually given us one of the greatest guides to assuring that the legacy we leave is positive and meaningful. And here is that guide. Step 1. Don't focus on what people will think of you tomorrow. Instead, focus on what you think of yourself today. Step 2. Don't aim for appearances. Instead, aim for action and authenticity. Step 3. Don't seek to be remembered for something. Seek to do something worth remembering. Step 4. Don't think too much about what you can leave behind. Instead, think about what you can give today. If you will follow this guide, and if you will put your focus in the right areas, then you certainly won't have to worry at all about the kind of legacy that you'll leave behind. Hello, and thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate all of you who are spending this time to grow your minds and learn more about Stoicism. I mean, all I can say is that I really hope that what I'm teaching is something worth learning. And look, if you do have any questions about Stoicism, or if you have any questions just for me, or about the podcast, or anything like that, I'd love to hear from you. I always love hearing from listeners of the podcast, and I'd love to know about you, where you're from and what you do about your life, because it's just interesting to me. I love meeting people from all around the world. And that's one thing that's been really cool about this podcast, is that it has given me the opportunity to meet these people from everywhere, from Denmark and Sweden and America and Canada and all over the place. And so it's such a cool thing. So anyway, you know where you can get me. You can go to risetothegoodlife.com and send me an email via the contact page. Otherwise, you can go to my Facebook page, which is Practical Stoic Quotes. But I'll talk to you next time, and until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it, and I hope that it helps you to live a better life. If you have been enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you're listening to this, and leave a positive review so that other people can have the chance to listen to this great work. Don't forget that you can see more free resources on my website at risetothegoodlife.com or on Facebook at Practical Stoic Quotes.